The moment you walk into a gym, surrounded by mirrors, metal, and motion, it feels like progress should be inevitable. You sweat, your heart races, your muscles burn, and yet, for most people, months pass with little real change. Here is the uncomfortable truth. The biggest mistake is not laziness, not lack of motivation, not even poor genetics. It is a quiet misunderstanding of how the human body actually adapts to stress, and almost everyone carries it with them between sets. Most people step into the gym carrying a deeply ingrained belief that effort itself is the currency of change, that the body is impressed by how tired you feel, how much you sweat, or how long you stay inside the building. This belief is emotionally satisfying because it frames progress as a moral reward for suffering. From a biological perspective, however, the human body does not recognize effort in the way the mind does. Cells do not measure intention, willpower, or exhaustion. They respond only to information. Every workout is a message sent to the body, and the body adapts only to what it can clearly interpret. When effort is high but the message is unclear, adaptation becomes weak, inconsistent, or non-existent. Muscle tissue grows when it detects a precise pattern of mechanical tension that exceeds what it is previously adapted to. This tension must be applied in a repeatable, progressive, and structured way. Random intensity confuses the system. When someone constantly changes exercises, rep ranges, tempos, and loads without a guiding structure, the body struggles to identify what exactly it is supposed to adapt to. Instead of strengthening specific fibers or improving force output in a measurable direction, the body defaults to general fatigue management. It conserves resources rather than investing them into growth, because the signal lacks direction. This is why many people feel exhausted after every workout, yet look and perform the same year after year. Fatigue is not adaptation. Fatigue is simply the cost of activity. Adaptation occurs only when the stress crosses a meaningful threshold and is repeated often enough for the body to justify structural change. In biology, change is expensive. Building new muscle proteins, reinforcing connective tissue, and upgrading neural pathways all require energy and recovery resources. The body will not do this unless the signal is consistent and specific enough to suggest that the environment has permanently changed. Another layer of this mistake lies in confusing novelty with effectiveness. Humans are psychologically wired to seek stimulation, variety, and excitement. A new exercise feels productive because it activates attention and creates the sensation of doing something different. But the body does not prioritize novelty. It prioritizes survival efficiency. If a stimulus does not repeat, the body has no incentive to adapt deeply. True progress often looks boring from the outside because it involves repeating similar movements, gradually increasing load, and refining technique over time. This repetition is not stagnation. It is how biological systems learn. Effort without structure often turns training into noise. From a physiological standpoint, noise is any signal that lacks a clear pattern. When workouts are driven by emotion, mood, or social influence rather than planned progression, the body receives conflicting instructions. One day the stimulus suggests endurance, another day maximal strength, another day metabolic stress. Each of these adaptations competes for resources. The result is diluted progress across all domains. The person is tired but not stronger, active but not more capable. This misunderstanding is reinforced by modern fitness culture, which glorifies intensity above all else. High heart rates, muscle burn, and post-workout soreness are marketed as indicators of success. Yet soreness is simply a byproduct of unfamiliar stress, not a marker of effective signaling. In fact, excessive soreness often indicates that the stimulus was too chaotic or aggressive for the body to recover from efficiently. When recovery is compromised, the signal never completes its cycle into adaptation. The body remains in a state of repair rather than improvement. From a cellular perspective, adaptation is a conversation, not a command. The workout speaks and recovery listens. Hormonal responses, protein synthesis, and nervous system recalibration all occur in response to the clarity of that initial message. When effort is scattered, the conversation becomes fragmented. The body hears urgency, but not instruction. It senses stress, but not direction. In response, it prioritizes short-term survival mechanisms rather than long-term growth. Many people unknowingly train in a way that maximizes discomfort while minimizing clarity. They rush through repetitions, sacrifice form, and chase exhaustion because it feels productive. But when movement quality breaks down, the signal shifts. Instead of targeting the intended muscles, the stress spreads across joints, connective tissue, and stabilizers in unpredictable ways. The body then adapts by increasing protective stiffness rather than functional strength. This is one reason chronic tightness and recurring pain are so common among people who train hard but without precision. The idea that more effort automatically equals more results is also emotionally dangerous. It teaches people to override bodily feedback instead of interpreting it. Fatigue, declining performance, and loss of motivation are often seen as weaknesses to push through rather than information to respond to. Over time, this disconnect erodes a relationship between mind and body. Training becomes adversarial rather than collaborative. The body is treated as something to conquer instead of something to communicate with. Scientific curiosity changes this dynamic. When training is approached as an experiment rather than a test of willpower, effort becomes purposeful instead of compulsive. Each workout asks a clear question. Can the body handle slightly more load, more control, or more precision than last time? When the answer is yes, the signal is reinforced. When the answer is no, the stimulus is adjusted. This iterative process is how biological systems evolve. They did not leap forward through brute force. They inch forward through feedback loops. The tragedy is that most people are capable of far more progress than they realize, but their effort is scattered across too many directions. They pour energy into workouts that feel intense but lack continuity. They exhaust themselves without educating their tissues. Over time, frustration grows, and the gym begins to feel like a place of diminishing returns. Motivation fades not because the person is weak, but because the system they're using is biologically inefficient. When effort is aligned with clarity, everything changes. The same hour in the gym produces radically different outcomes when the signal is precise. Muscles respond more predictably. Strength increases feel stable rather than fleeting. Recovery improves because the body understands what it is recovering from. Even mentally, training becomes calmer. There is less urgency to destroy oneself and more interest in refinement and progression. At its core, this mistake is philosophical as much as physiological. It reflects a broader human tendency to equate suffering with value, to believe that hardship alone guarantees reward. Biology does not operate on moral logic. It operates on adaptive logic. It rewards patterns, not punishment. Understanding this does not reduce effort. It elevates it. Effort becomes intelligent, deliberate, and respectful of the system it is trying to change. The body is always listening, but it listens for coherence, not chaos. Every repetition, every set, every session contributes to a larger message about what you are asking it to become. When that message is inconsistent, the body hesitates. When it is clear, repeated, and progressive, the body hesitates. When it is clear, repeated, and progressive, the body responds with remarkable efficiency, slowly reshaping itself in ways that feel almost effortless over time. As if it were simply following instructions it finally understands and beginning to reorganize itself around a new set of demands that no longer feel foreign, but increasingly familiar and expected as the signal continues to repeat and deepen across weeks and months, while the body quietly adjusts beneath the surface without drama or noise or sudden transformation, but through a steady accumulation of small, precise changes that only make sense when viewed as part of a larger adaptive conversation, rather than isolated moments of strain and exhaustion that never quite connect into something the body can fully recognize or commit to building upon. Most people enter the gym thinking they are training muscles, but in reality they are training a nervous system that merely uses muscles as its instruments. Every movement you perform begins as an electrical intention in the brain long before it becomes a mechanical action in the body. The brain decides which fibers fire, in what sequence, with how much force, and for how long. Muscles do not work independently. They obey neural commands. When this relationship is ignored, training becomes incomplete, no matter how heavy the weight or how long the session lasts. The nervous system is responsible for efficiency. Its primary goal is not to build muscle or burn fat, but to reduce unnecessary effort while maintaining survival. When a movement pattern is poorly learned or repeatedly performed with low awareness, the nervous system compensates by distributing work inefficiently. This is why two people can perform the same exercise with the same load and experience entirely different results. One individual may stimulate targeted muscle fibers with precision, while the other spread the effort across joints, connective tissue, and secondary muscles in protective strategy designed to avoid perceived threat. Attention plays a critical role in this process. Scientific research in motor learning shows that focus intent during movement increases motor unit recruitment and improves coordination between muscles. When attention drifts, the nervous system defaults to habitual patterns rather than optimized ones. This means that distracted training reinforces old, inefficient movement strategies instead of building new, stronger ones. Over time, strength plateaus not because the muscles have reached their limit, but because the neural pathways controlling them have stopped improving. Many people rush through repetitions believing that volume alone drives progress. From the nervous system perspective, speed without control is often interpreted as instability. When movements are rushed, the brain increases co-contraction of opposing muscles to stabilize joints. This protective mechanism reduces force output and limits muscle engagement. The lifter feels effort, but the signal is diluted. Instead of teaching the nervous system to produce force efficiently, the workout teaches it to be cautious. The mind-muscle connection is often treated as a motivational concept, but it is fundamentally neurological. Conscious awareness of a working muscle enhances cortical representation of that muscle in the brain. Over time, this improves firing rates and synchronization. This is why beginners often gain strength rapidly before any visible muscle growth occurs. The nervous system is learning to use existing tissue more effectively. When attention is absent, this neural adaptation slows dramatically, even in experienced lifters. Breathing is another overlooked component of neural control. The rhythm of breath influences the autonomic nervous system, which governs stress responses. Shallow, chaotic breathing signals threat, increasing sympathetic activation. In this state, fine motor control deteriorates. Movements become rigid, and the nervous system prioritizes stability over performance. Controlled breathing, on the other hand, supports parasympathetic balance, allowing smoother coordination and better force expression. This is why experienced athletes often appear calm under load. Their nervous systems are regulated, not overwhelmed. Ignoring the nervous system also increases injury risk. When neural coordination is poor, joints absorb forces that muscles should be managing. The body compensates by increasing tension in surrounding tissues, leading to chronic tightness and discomfort. Pain is not always a sign of tissue damage. It is often a sign of poor communication between the brain and body. Training that lacks awareness amplifies this disconnect, reinforcing movement patterns that the nervous system perceives as unsafe. There is also a psychological cost in neglecting neural engagement. When training becomes purely mechanical, motivation fades. The brain craves learning and mastery, not repetition without meaning. Engaging the nervous system through focused movement turns each set into a skill practice rather than a chore. This shift transforms training from something endured into something explored. Progress becomes internally rewarding, not just visually measured. Strength itself is largely a neural phenomenon. Maximum force output depends on how many motor units are recruited and how synchronously they fire. Muscle size matters, but without neural efficiency, size alone does not translate into usable strength. This is why individuals with smaller physiques can sometimes outperform larger ones. Their nervous systems are better trained to coordinate and express force. The modern gym environment often works against neural focus. Loud music, mirrors, social comparison, and constant digital distraction pull attention outward. While these elements may increase arousal, they often reduce precision. High arousal without control leads to sloppy movement. The nervous system becomes reactive rather than deliberate. Over time, this reactivity limits progress and increases wear on the body. Training with intention does not mean training softly. It means training clearly. Each repetition becomes a deliberate act of communication between brain and body. The lifter is not just moving weight, but refining a pattern. Load becomes a tool for learning, not just a measure of toughness. This approach aligns with how the nervous system evolves, through repeated, focused exposure to manageable challenges. As neural pathways strengthen, movements become more efficient. Less energy is wasted on unnecessary tension. Muscles fire in better sequence. Recovery improves because the body experiences less internal conflict. Fatigue becomes localized rather than systemic. The person feels worked, not drained. This is a sign that the nervous system understands the task it is being given. Neglecting this aspect of training keeps many people trapped in a cycle of effort without mastery. They work hard but feel clumsy. They lift heavier but feel less stable. Their bodies grow tired but not skilled. Over time, frustration replaces curiosity. The gym becomes a place of obligation rather than growth. When the nervous system is treated as the central player in training, everything changes. Progress accelerates not through more strain, but through better communication. The body becomes more responsive, more coordinated, more resilient. Strength feels smoother. Movement feels lighter even under heavy load. The individual stops fighting their body and starts working with it. This shift requires patience and humility. It asks the lifter to slow down enough to feel what is happening beneath the surface. It replaces ego with awareness and chaos with intention. But the reward is profound. Training becomes sustainable. Injuries decrease. Progress continues long after others plateau. Ultimately, the nervous system does not care how much weight is on the bar or how intense the workout looks from the outside. It cares about patterns, safety, and clarity. When those needs are met, it adapts with remarkable efficiency, gradually reorganizing itself to support greater strength, control, and confidence in movement as the brain refines its internal maps of the body and the muscles respond with improved coordination and power that emerge not from force alone, but from understanding repeated consistently over time until movements feel less like tasks and more like expressions of a system that knows exactly what it is doing. And why many people walk into the gym believing that pain and extreme fatigue are most reliable indicators of productive workout. The soreness the next day, the burning sensation during the set, the feeling of being completely drained afterward are all interpreted as evidence that something meaningful has happened. This belief is deeply rooted in human psychology. Pain feels like proof. It creates a narrative of sacrifice and effort that the mind can easily understand. The body, however, does not interpret pain in the same way. From a biological standpoint, pain and fatigue are warning signals, not progress markers. They communicate stress, threat, and resource depletion rather than growth. When the body encounters stress, it must decide how to respond. This decision is governed by survival priorities. If the stress is manageable and followed by adequate recovery, the body invests resources into adaptation. If the stress is excessive or constant, the body shifts into protection mode. In this state, energy is redirected toward repair, inflammation control, and damage limitation. Muscle growth, strength increases, and metabolic improvements are temporarily deprioritized. Many people unknowingly train themselves into this protective state by repeatedly pushing past their recovery capacity while mistaking exhaustion for effectiveness. Soreness is often misunderstood. Delayed muscle soreness primarily results from unfamiliar or excessive eccentric stress that creates microscopic damage in muscle tissue. This damage triggers an inflammatory response, which the brain interprets as discomfort. While some inflammation is part of the adaptation process, excessive soreness indicates that the stimulus was either too novel or too aggressive. In such cases, the body's primary task becomes restoring tissue integrity, not improving performance. Growth is paused until safety is reestablished. Fatigue operates on multiple levels. There is local muscular fatigue, which reflects temporary depletion of energy substrates and accumulation of metabolic byproducts. There is also central fatigue, which originates in the nervous system and reduces the brain's willingness to drive muscles forcefully. Central fatigue is particularly important because it influences motivation, coordination, and perceived effort. When central fatigue accumulates due to insufficient recovery, the brain deliberately limits output as a protective strategy. Pushing harder in this state does not override the limit. It reinforces it. Hormonal responses further complicate this picture. Intense training elevates stress hormones that are necessary in the short term but harmful when chronically elevated. These hormones increase alertness and mobilize energy, but they also suppress tissue-building processes when present for too long. Sleep quality declines, appetite regulation becomes distorted, and immune function weakens. From the body's perspective, this hormonal environment signals instability. Growth is postponed because survival feels uncertain. Recovery is not passive rest. It is an active biological process. Protein synthesis, glycogen replenishment, neural recalibration, and connective tissue repair all occur during periods of low stress. When recovery is insufficient, these processes remain incomplete. The next workout is layered on top of unresolved fatigue. Over time, this accumulation creates a baseline state of exhaustion that many people mistakenly accept as normal. They feel tired even before training begins, yet continue to chase intensity in an attempt to feel productive. The paradox is that constant intensity often produces diminishing returns. Performance stagnates or declines. Strength fluctuates unpredictably. Motivation erodes. Small aches become chronic issues. The body is not failing. It is adapting exactly as designed. It is reducing output to protect itself from perceived overuse. This protective adaptation is often misinterpreted as lack of discipline or poor genetics, leading people to push even harder and deepen the cycle. Biological systems thrive on balance, not extremes. Stress must be followed by sufficient relief for adaptation to occur. This is true at every level, from cellular metabolism to psychological resilience. When training ignores this principle, the body becomes trapped in a loop of breakdown and repair without upward progress. Growth requires not just stress, but the space to respond to that stress meaningfully. Pain tolerance is frequently praised in fitness culture, but tolerance is not the same as intelligence. The ability to endure discomfort does not guarantee positive adaptation. In some cases, it simply means the warning system is being overridden. The nervous system learns from this pattern. When pain signals are consistently ignored, the body increases their intensity to ensure they are noticed. This escalation can manifest as chronic pain syndromes that persist even in the absence of significant tissue damage. Another overlooked consequence of excessive fatigue is movement degradation. As fatigue accumulates, coordination declines. Muscles lose their timing. Stabilizers fail earlier. The nervous system compensates by stiffening movement patterns to maintain control. This stiffness reduces force efficiency and increases joint stress. Over time, this compensation becomes habitual, altering posture and movement quality even outside the gym. The person becomes strong in dysfunctional patterns, while remaining weak in functional ones. The idea that growth happens during recovery is often stated, but rarely internalized. Many people conceptually understand it, but emotionally resist it. Rest feels unproductive. It lacks the visible struggle that effort provides. Yet from a physiological standpoint, rest is where the real work happens. During sleep, growth hormone release increases. Neural connections are reinforced. Metabolic waste is cleared. These processes cannot be rushed or replaced by more training. Listening to body does not mean avoiding challenge. It means interpreting signals accurately. A productive workout leaves the body stimulated but not threatened. There is a sense of fatigue without depletion, soreness without debilitation, effort without despair. This balance allows consistency, and consistency is the true driver of long-term adaptation. When people shift their focus from how hard a workout feels to how well the body recovers and performs over time, progress becomes more predictable. Strength increases steadily. Energy levels stabilize. Motivation returns because training no longer feels like a battle against exhaustion. The body begins to trust the process. The compassion required for this shift is often underestimated. It requires letting go of the identity built around suffering. It asks for patience in a culture obsessed with intensity. But this compassion is not weakness. It is biological literacy. It recognizes that the human body is not a machine that can be endlessly pushed without consequence, but a living system that responds intelligently to the environment it is placed in. When recovery is respected, training stress becomes a signal for growth rather than a threat to survive. The body invests in strength, resilience, and efficiency because it senses stability. Over time, the person experiences fewer setbacks, fewer injuries, and more sustainable progress. The gym transforms from a place of punishment into a place of cultivation. Pain and fatigue will always be part of training, but they are not the destination. They are information. When that information is understood and used wisely, the body responds with remarkable adaptability. It grows stronger not through constant strain, but through a rhythm of challenge and restoration that mirrors the way all healthy biological systems evolve, gradually and intelligently, shaping themselves around demands that are firm enough to inspire change, yet gentle enough to allow the body to recover fully and return stronger each time without being trapped in a cycle of depletion that never quite resolves into true progress or lasting improvement that can be carried forward with confidence and vitality as training becomes supportive practice rather than a constant test of endurance and pain that the body learns to endure rather than transform in ways that support long-term health and functional strength. Many people approach training with an invisible clock ticking in their minds, a timeline shaped more by motivation videos and social media transformations than by biology. They expect visible change within weeks and dramatic change within months. When that does not happen, frustration sets in. This frustration is not rooted in failure, but in a misunderstanding of how time operates inside the human body. Biological systems do not adapt on emotional schedules. They adapt on physiological ones, and those timelines are slower, layered, and often invisible in the early stages. At the cellular level, adaptation is incremental. Muscle fibers strengthen through the gradual accumulation of contractile proteins. This process requires repeated signaling, adequate nutrition, and sufficient recovery, all sustained over time. Connective tissues such as tendons and ligaments adapt even more slowly because they have limited blood supply. They prioritize structural integrity over rapid change. When training intensity escalates faster than these tissues can adapt, discomfort and injury emerge, not because the body is weak, but because it is being rushed beyond its biological capacity. The nervous system also operates on its own timeline. Learning efficient movement patterns, improving coordination, and refining force reduction are processes that unfold through repetition and rest. Early strength gains are often neural, rather than muscular, but even these gains plateau if the system is overloaded too quickly. When impatience drives constant program changes, the nervous system never settles into a stable pattern long enough to optimize it. Progress resets repeatedly, giving the illusion of hard work without forward momentum. Metabolic adaptations follow similar rules. Improving insulin sensitivity, mitochondrial density, and cardiovascular efficiency requires consistent exposure to manageable stress. These changes do not announce themselves dramatically. They manifest quietly as improved endurance, better energy levels, and more stable performance. When people chase rapid aesthetic change, they often overlook these foundational improvements, despite the fact that long-term health and physique development depend on them. Impatience often leads to program hopping. One week it is strength-focused training, the next week high-intensity circuits, followed by endurance work, followed by complete rest born of burnout. Each shift restarts the adaptation clock. The body is remarkably adaptable, but it requires continuity. When the signal changes too frequently, the body remains in a constant state of adjustment rather than consolidation. It becomes competent at coping, not at excelling. This impatience is reinforced by comparison. Watching others progress faster creates a sense of urgency that ignores individual variability. Genetics, training history, sleep quality, stress levels, and nutrition all influence adaptation speed. Two bodies exposed to identical training will not respond identically. When people compare outcomes without comparing context, they draw inaccurate conclusions about their own progress and push themselves in ways that are misaligned with their biology. Time perception also changes under stress. When effort is high and recovery is low, days blur together. Progress feels slow because the nervous system is fatigued. In contrast, when training is balanced and recovery is adequate, weeks pass with a sense of steady momentum. The body feels responsive. This subjective experience of time often reflects internal physiological state more accurately than external measurements. Another consequence of impatience is the escalation of load before mastery. People add weight before movement patterns are stable. From the outside, this looks like ambition. From the inside, it creates inefficient force distribution. The body compensates by reinforcing flawed mechanics, which later become limiting factors. Strength gained on unstable foundations is fragile. It often disappears under stress or leads to chronic issues that stall progress entirely. Biological adaptation values repetition more than intensity spikes. A moderate stimulus applied consistently over months produces far greater change than extreme effort applied sporadically. This principle is counterintuitive in a culture that celebrates dramatic effort. Yet every long-term adaptation in the body follows this rule. Bone density increases through repeated loading. Cardiovascular efficiency improves through sustained aerobic work. Muscle hypertrophy emerges from cumulative protein synthesis over time, not from isolated heroic workouts. The expectation of rapid change also undermines motivation. When results are tied to short timelines, motivation becomes fragile. Any perceived delay feels like failure. In contrast, when progress is viewed as a long-term process, setbacks become part of the landscape rather than evidence of inadequacy. The person remains engaged because the goal is no longer immediate transformation, but gradual refinement. There is a psychological maturation that occurs when someone aligns their expectations with biological reality. Training becomes less emotional and more deliberate. Decisions are guided by feedback rather than urgency. Small improvements are noticed and valued. This mindset supports consistency, which is the most powerful variable in any training program. The body itself rewards patience. When stress is applied at a rate it can accommodate, adaptation compounds. Strength builds on strength. Skill builds on skill. Recovery becomes more efficient. Over time, progress accelerates precisely because it was not rushed. This compounding effect is often invisible early on, which is why many abandon the process just before it begins to pay dividends. Impatience also affects recovery behaviors. People sacrifice sleep, nutrition, and rest days in an attempt to speed up progress. Ironically, these sacrifices slow adaptation. Sleep deprivation impairs hormone regulation and tissue repair. Inadequate nutrition limits the availability of building blocks needed for growth. The body responds by conserving energy, not by accelerating change. Understanding biological time reframes setbacks. Plateaus are not signs of failure. They are signals that adaptation has caught up with stimulus. They invite adjustment, not abandonment. Minor regressions are often part of consolidation phases where the body reorganizes itself internally. Without patience, these phases are misinterpreted as stagnation. The most profound changes in the body often occur quietly. Posture improves. Movement becomes smoother. Energy stabilizes. These changes may not immediately reflect in the mirror, but they form the infrastructure for visible transformation. When impatience dominates, these subtle shifts are ignored or dismissed, even though they indicate deep adaptation. Accepting biological time requires humility. It acknowledges that the body is not a project to be rushed, but a system to be cultivated. This acceptance reduces internal conflict. Training no longer feels like a race against the clock, but a long-term relationship with one's own physiology. As expectations slow down, awareness sharpens. People begin to notice patterns, how sleep affects performance, how stress influences recovery, how consistency outperforms intensity. These insights further improve decision-making, creating a feedback loop that supports sustainable progress. The irony is that when people stop trying to force rapid change, results often arrive sooner than expected, not because the body suddenly speeds up, but because wasted effort is eliminated. Energy is directed efficiently. Recovery is respected. Signals are clear. The system works as designed. Biological time is not an obstacle. It is the medium through which lasting change occurs. When training aligns with this reality, frustration fades. Progress becomes steady, predictable, and resilient. The body responds not with dramatic overnight transformation, but with a deep, durable evolution that unfolds gradually, quietly, and reliably as long as the signals remain consistent and the patience to let them accumulate is maintained without constantly interrupting the process with urgency, doubt, or comparison that distracts from the simple truth that meaningful adaptation is always happening beneath the surface, even when it cannot yet be seen, measured, or emotionally validated, and continues to build layer upon layer as long as it is given the uninterrupted time it requires to fully express itself.